welcome to Zombie Life with me, Dead Ned. On today's episode, I'll be taking a fond look back at a classic issue of probably the king of magazines dedicated entirely to horror, Fangoria. Fangoria hit the shelves way back in 1979, documenting the rise in popularity of horror movies, and was probably at its heights of fame in the 1980s. Although it continued to publish in the 90s and noughties, and it's still going, but only in digital format. So let's jump back in time to 1982, with the release of issue 19, and see what goodies it has to offer. Here's a magazine that literally jump scares off of the newsagent's shelves, with its classic bold and eye-catching title design and covers that didn't hold back on giving its readers more than a peek at the devilish delights in store for them. Without the internet and knowledge of up-and-coming horror films, this was pretty much your first look at things to come in the world of horror. Here we have Poltergeist taking prime position, and this picture really gives a first impression of what the going on here. What are those things? Zombies? Skeletons? And what's all that brown they're in? And let's be honest, now having watched the film numerous times, what's actually going on doesn't disappoint when it comes to the final film. To be honest, as a little zombie, I didn't even know what Poltergeist meant. It sounded scary though. Then there's 3 smaller images down the side. One of American Werewolf during mid-change, a glimpse at Mad Max Road Warrior, back when it was more Mad Max and not so much Mad Mel.
Sometimes I just go nuts like now.
There's 3D Terror with Parasite. Another teasing pic, because you really have to look at it to see what's going on. Some kind of horrible creature, and is it taking a bite out of someone? Great stuff, and I suppose there could be an argument that the pictures give too much away, much like some of the images inside, but they sure made for awesome front covers. On the inside cover, here's a glossy poster for Megaforce, coming this summer, and probably only staying for about a week. And here's the contents page, whetting the appetite so to speak, with more cool images. Another full page ad here for a book aimed at horror buffs, called Splatter Movies. It was the book everyone was talking about, apparently, even Grandma. The first main article is on Parasite 3D from producer-director Charles Band, who had a good reputation at the time for low-budget horrors. He talks about the difficulties of getting people interested in making a 3D movie. 3D was a bit of a thing at the time in the 80s. You also had Friday the 13th 3D and Jaws 3D. Yet normally films that had a third sequel, funnily enough. Some nice graphic pictures here that showed the film would deliver on the gory goods. Late monster maker Marvel Stan Winston provided the creature effects for this movie, which also featured a young Demi Moore in one of her first movie roles. She's since gone on to say it's the worst movie she's ever been in. Striptease Demi? Just saying. The 3D theme continues with a look at Rottweiler, and a picture that says there will be actual Rottweiler attacks, and there'll also be blood and also, mud wrestling. Apparently, the Rottweiler used was a horror veteran, having already been in The Omen and The Omen 3. Wow. Then there's a set location visit to John Carpenter's The Thing, with a big chunk of the conversation discussing the use of stop-motion animation. Interesting, as only a small bit of stop-motion animation was used in the final cut of the film. Probably wasn't the plan at the time. Out on location, the interviewer Bob Martin describes watching a scene being filmed where a stuntman is set on fire and crashes through the wall of a shack, falling onto the snow. Any true Thing fan knows exactly how that comes about in the film. The pictures don't give too much away, keeping it a mystery, which is understandable as the film was still in production. Creepshow has a second part of an interview, and I particularly like this page spread, with all the photos tinged with red. There's also some good behind-the-scenes info and a bit of a chat with horror veteran Adrienne Barbeau, who mentions that scenes were shot and designed to look like comic book panels, and as we know, the finished film really managed to pull that effect off. Genre fave Dick Miller talks about his career. This was pre-Gremlins, but he does mention working with Joe Dante on The Howling. There's an interview with John Landis, John Carpenter and David Cronenberg. They talk about various things. What scares them? Are there things they think shouldn't be shown in films? Cronenberg obviously says no. And the old age question of, are horror films harmful? Carpenter mentions that he always intended The Fog to be a PG rating, seeing it more as a kids film. Really, John? They finished by mentioning things they changed in their films, the most interesting one being Cronenberg saying the famous exploding head moment in Scanners was originally a lot earlier in the film. Love this movie soundtrack spread. You could buy LPs with all their glorious artwork. Meet the Beast talks about the Beast Within with Paul Clemens, who played the lead character. There's some cool pics of the makeup effects and a bit of controversy over the film being deemed a failure with certain reviewers from other magazines. And Cat People director Paul Schrader claiming the horror cycle was over because of the supposed failure of the Beast Within. Meow Paul! And of course we all know the horror cycle was far from over. I personally like The Beast Within, a creepy movie with some really classic 80s bladder transformation effects. The Road Warrior article describes the movie as a futuristic adventure that surpasses even its predecessor Mad Max for nightmarish danger and headlong excitement, which I suppose is a pretty accurate description for the sequel. The Road Warrior is certainly not a horror film, but I suppose they could justify it with some of the character images looking a bit like slasher killers. Even Max looks a bit madder than usual in this pic. Looks like he's attacking the poor lad, not saving him. Makeup effects legend Greg Canham gets some love in an article with some really nice graphic images that Fangoria was famous for. Love this one from The Howling. The Poltergeist article with an interview with Frank Marshall is okay, although it does take its time to actually get round to talking about making Poltergeist. Some really dramatic pictures though that really give a sense of its epic scale. And there's a little pic here of producer Steven Spielberg, who seems to be looking at director Tobe Hooper and thinking, that's not how I would do it. I'll go tell him after this take. This is great. It's a 1981 movie poll results from the previous year. There's a tie at the top for best film between Raiders of the Lost Ark and American Werewolf in London. But come on, Raiders is a great movie, but it's not horror. Awesome to see The Howling near the top of the poll too. Another brilliant werewolf film. The worst film vote went to Friday the 13th Part 2. Now, considering the company in the list and some of the other horror films of that year, I'm not entirely sure that's fair. Jason fans would have been outraged, and Jason would have been really And look at this list of best makeup artist. The days of practical makeup effects. Oh, and here's a competition where you could draw the thing when no one knew what it looked like. Come to think of it, we still don't know what it really looks like. In the classified ads, you could order horror and sci-fi t-shirts. But seriously, were these drawn by a 5-year-old? Now, one of these horror masks I would have ordered. Very cool. And finally on the back page, there's a poster for Blade Runner. Again, not horror, but if you didn't know much about it, it looked like a must-watch movie. So that was issue 19 of Fangoria. I always get a bit nostalgic looking back at the older issues that chronicle a great time to be a horror fanatic. Thanks for the bloody memories, Fangoria. And thanks for watching. Until next time, stay warm and stay tasty. Hey zombie lovers, hit the subscribe button now so you'll never miss an episode. I'll be up to all kinds of things from playing board and video games, reviewing absolutely anything horror related that takes my fancy, or sometimes just talking about my zombie life.